I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Kudos to all of our listeners here on KFAI. Kudos to my colleagues at the station doing great work for the community all the time. I want to invite everybody to support this show going over to our YouTube channel, YouTube Insight News MN, and subscribing. We want to grow our subscriber base for The Conversation with Al McFarlane to about 1,000. We're on the way. We need your help. And the way you help us is by taking a minute, going over to YouTube, Insight News MN, and subscribing. Of course, share and like. Tell a bunch of your friends that this important conversation is going on right now, and they should join us as well. As always, we promise a great program, a great conversation, a robust conversation. I'm pleased to have a guest who was a new light in the theatrical world, working at Children's Theater Company, Raiyon Hunter. We'll talk to her in a few minutes. Before I do, our friends over at Minnesota Department of Health want to remind you to follow the COVID-19 protocols, meaning wash your hands and stay aware and prioritize prevention. Together we can create awareness and encourage testing and help everybody stay healthy. So enjoy this show. Remember, get well, get healthy. Well, we start the program often with what we call hot topics. And, this week yesterday, celebrating in Minnesota for the first time, Juneteenth as a formal holiday. We've joined a number of other states in the country and the federal government in recognizing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And yesterday at insightnews.com, we posted a story that kind of gives you the background. The story is entitled "The Story Behind Juneteenth and How It Became a Federal Holiday." I'll read a couple of paragraphs just so that you know, if you're not up on Juneteenth, what it's about. And this story says that, Black Americans, many Americans are celebrating Juneteenth to mark the day in 1865 when the last enslaved people in the United States learned they were free. For generations, Black Americans have recognized the end of one of the darkest chapters in U.S. history with joy in the form of parades, street festivals, musical performances, or cookouts. The government was slow to embrace the occasion. It was only in 2021 that President Joe Biden signed a bill passed by Congress to set aside Juneteenth, or June 19th, as a federal holiday. And just as many people learn what Juneteenth is all about, the traditions are facing new pressures like political rhetoric, condemning efforts to teach Americans about the nation's racial history, companies using the holiday as a marketing event, and people partying without understanding why. So what we want you to do is go to insightnews.com, read the story, learn why Juneteenth, the why, and why it's important, and what it means to you, to us, and to all of our country. We have another hot topic in the same vein. This article is also a piece published at insightnews.com, and the headline says that Juneteenth offers new ways to teach about slavery, Black perseverance, and American history. It's an article by Raphael E. Rogers, who's professor of practice and education at Clark University. And we published this today at insightnews.com. A couple of paragraphs from that. He says, whenever I tell high school students in classes I visit that I appreciated learning about slavery as a child, growing up in the Caribbean, they often look confused. Why, they ask, did I like learning about slavery given that it was so horrible and harsh? How could I value being taught something or about something that caused so much hurt and harm? That's why when I tell them that my teachers in St. Thomas in my fourth grade history textbook didn't focus just on the harsh conditions of slavery. Rather, they also focused on the Black freedom fighters, such as Moses Gottlieb, perhaps better known as General Budo, who is credited with leading a nonviolent revolt that led to the abolishment of slavery in the Danish-ruled West Indies on July 3rd, 1848. The historic date is now observed and celebrated in the United States Virgin Islands as Emancipation Day. Well, that's a good beginning. It's a story you want to check out. We need to make the connection. I mean, what is Juneteenth to us? And I've heard in social media and on some of the television programs I watch, our people referring to Juneteenth is our 4th of July. Think about that. One commentator, one talk program was talking about the beauty of this and the power of it is that it connects sort of a summer arc or a half-year arc from Juneteenth down towards Kwanzaa, elevating Black values, an Africana way of knowing, a way that Africans can assemble the world and create stories that reflect our humanity, our dignity, our vision, our perseverance, and our future, the future that we must create for ourselves and therefore for fellow human beings. Well, think about it and go to insightnews.com, other places, and learn about Juneteenth, what it means, and how it's going to be important that we continue to focus on conversations around slavery and the resistance, the resilience, and the freedom work that we have created and have come from. Well, the last hot topic is an op-ed that is also in Insight in our June 20th or 19th edition. It's a piece written by Andrew Cuomo, former governor of New York, and Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., who is the leader of the Black Press of America, the National Newspaper Publishers Association. And it says, time to act on crime, violence, and police reform in America. I'll just read the first opening paragraph and invite you to go read it yourself at insightnews.com. And it starts off saying, America 2023, tumultuous times. Yes, yet amid the greatest domestic challenges of American history, our nation has attempted to respond to the challenges through transformative public policy initiatives that have moved America toward a more perfect, inclusive union. It's a big statement. Find out where it goes. Go to insightnews.com and see if you agree. Love to have your comments, your feedback on it. Well, let me go now to introduce our guest today. And as I do that, I want to invite you who are listening again or watching, listening on KFAI, to get a minute, log on to YouTube, Insight News MN, and subscribe to this program and share it with your friends. We want to grow our subscribers, and I want to thank you again. Just so you know, we stream this program live on 2 YouTube channels, the Insight News channel that I've been referring to, but we also stream it at Black Press USA. We stream it on 3 Facebook platforms. My personal one, Facebook Al McFarlane. We stream it on Insight News Facebook. We also stream this program on Black Press USA Facebook. Finally, we are streaming live to Twitter and streaming live to LinkedIn. So wherever you are, however you connected or listening on the radio, join us, support us, be a part of this community, a part of this conversation. Well, Raiyon Hunter is the newly named associate, get that right, let me get it right, is the newly named casting director at Children's Theater Company. And she's been in town about 3 weeks now. And I'm reading from a press release that we received, that we published in Insight News, that says that the CTC Artistic Director, Peter Brocious, indicates how pleased they are that Raiyon has joined the Children's Theater Company as the new casting director, that she brings tremendous energy, insight, and commitment to this position and is a remarkable young leader. She has extensive experience from her time as associate casting director at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, and from working in casting at the St. Louis Repertory Theater as well. Well, Raiyon, welcome to Twin Cities. Welcome to CTC. Good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you all.
Well, I tell my guest, Raiyon, that this is like an informal conversation, like you and I hanging out and getting to know each other. We just happen to be sharing our private conversation with 100,000 people. So this is an intimate conversation, and we can tell whatever we want to talk about to the whole world. Let's start by talking about your background, what you've done in theater, and how you've come to this part of your career.
Absolutely. So how I got into theater, I've been in theater since I was about 3 or 5 years old. My parents will tell you that My birth was actually very dramatic, if we're being honest. But then after that, I kind of just fell in love with acting. I fell in love with performing. My parents always told the story to everyone about how, I would perform and I wouldn't leave the stage. And from
Hmm.
there, it just kind of like created this love of ensemble and intimacy and live performance that was groomed by a lot of mentors that I've had. So there are a lot of people who have kind of like taken me under their wing and put me in different positions or places, or taught me what a monologue was. My parents were very big in making sure that I had access to all they knew when it came to theater, which honestly wasn't much, which was okay because they did all that they could with what they had. But it was really in high school when I met my mentor, Allison Lee Brown, who is this phenomenal actor. And she kind of took me under her wing and she helped me to find my purpose when it came to theater, which, wasn't specifically may have been on the stage, but it was also in a producerial and directing aspect. And from then, she was a Spelman College graduate. And I loved how she talked about the institution. I loved how she talked about how it actually shaped her into the woman that she is today. Um, and I was like, I have to go visit the school. And the minute I walked on Spelman College's campus, I knew for a fact that that was
Well,
the school for me. And
Spellman is enchanting.
Spelman is enchanting,
Yeah.
and everyone there loved their institution, like truly
Hmm.
with their whole heart. But it was there that I kind of like got into the thick of acting, like behind the stage and being light operator and producing and assistant directing and still acting. But I wanted to be involved in all of the parts, and everybody was like, "You need to pick one. You need to pick which one you want to do." And I'm like, "Do I have to pick one?"
Hmm.
I was like, girl, I'm a Black woman. I could do all of them if I really feel like it. So, I decided to go into producerial position because I felt like producing was that kind of like umbrella that got to work in all these different areas.
Hmm.
So the one major theater in Atlanta is the Alliance Theater, which a lot of people know. And the Alliance actually has a program called the Spelman Leadership Program. And so 3 Spelman seniors are chosen as interns their senior year. And then you apply to the fellowship after your senior year, and one gets a 2-year fully salaried fellowship, which is phenomenal because it also brings about so many opportunities to interact with like phenomenal directors and playwrights and artists. So
Hmm.
through that, I started working in casting, and I became the casting associate to Jodie Feldman, who taught me everything that I know. Um, and I started loving being like kind of the first point of contact when it came to the artist,
Hmm.
because when you think about it, being an artist is such a vulnerable position. It's so vulnerable because you have to kind of like put yourself out there and hope that you're good enough. And I think that some people kind of don't really think about that when they're interacting with artists and making sure that they feel comfortable and safe. So it felt really good to me to be the first point of contact and to get to know them and what roles they like and to talk to them about them as a person and a human and not just labor. And that was something that was really fun and exciting for me. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I mean, casting is a producerial position. And it's one of those positions where you kind of get to interact with these phenomenal people and these phenomenal artists. So that is how I got into the position that I am today through the Alliance Spelman Leadership Fellowship.
Well, we're going to go back and talk more about that a little
Yeah.
later. Let's talk about where you are right now at Children's Theater
Yeah.
Company and your role as the casting director. So, what do you do as casting director? And for those who might not be aware, because they're either not in town or they just haven't paid attention, talk about CTC. It's really a jewel. It's a national,
Absolutely.
international jewel. Take a
Absolutely.
minute to.
Children's Theater Company is a national jewel. So Theater Company is one of the largest organization that produces productions for intergenerational audiences. And it has been doing the work of molding these young performers and getting their love of theater for so many years. so many years led, and most of them those years led by Peter Brochus, who is phenomenal artistic director of the organization. So what I do at CTC is I am the casting director, so I cast all of our productions. And there's a kind of a little misconception with casting. I think a lot of people think that the casting director makes the final decision when it comes to shows, but really our job is to recruit and to find the best artist to put in front of the director. So if the director is really looking for a feisty 10-year-old girl to play this role, my job is to find everyone who's in our database who fits that description, and then also go out into the city and recruit and find artists who I can put in front of the director and say like, hey, these are phenomenal people, and give them the best selection for them to choose from.
So
So that is
you get people who are already acting, but you also find people that you introduce to the craft,
yes,
right?
yes. So there are people who are already acting, but there are also students who, and this is will be a big part of my position in the recruitment of it all. My position will be going out into the city and finding those diamonds in the rough, and those students who didn't have that, who may not have had those opportunities to be a part of theater without someone coming and saying, you are so talented.
Mm.
And the reason I kind of sit there is because that kind of used to be me. My parents did all of they could with what they knew about theater. And I used to be the student who was so into everything. And my parents, like my mom, going around asking people like, do I need to get my child an agent? How do you even get an agent? Are you supposed to like pay for it? Like what like all of the questions,
Mhm.
how do I actually get in theater? How do I audition? How do I get in front of these people? What are headshots? All of those questions you usually don't have the answers to.
Mhm.
And it took my parents a long time, it took me a long time to figure out what it meant to be in the theater
Sure.
industry. So, being in this position where I kind of get to pay it back and go into these schools and also look at those students and say, like, you have that twinkle in your eye. Do you want to do, like, is this something that you want to pursue? And then getting them into classes here and then eventually getting them into productions is just something that warms my heart, and it makes me really, really happy that it something that I love aligns with CTC's mission.
Well, so Rayon, walk me through a couple of encounters. First of all, to our listeners, you're listening to Conversations with Al McFarlane. My guest is Raiyon Hunter. She's a new casting director at Children's Theater Company. And we're just hanging out, having a good conversation. Rayon, as you're talking, walk me through a couple of casting scenarios, because I'm trying to imagine how that happens, how it takes place.
Mhm.
And let me set up a couple of scenarios. One is a 12-year-old kid out of North Minneapolis who's done some choir work at say New Salem Baptist Church, and maybe done a school play at one of the neighborhood schools, who thinks he should be, and he loves he's in, enjoying performing and being in an ensemble.
Yeah.
How do you connect with that person to identify, number one, that he has potential and that his interests can be supported and nurtured? That's question one. Question two is you're looking for somebody and you don't know where she is,
Hmm.
but you're at the mall, and what instincts? I mean, how do you go ask somebody, ask a parent? What happens?
Yeah. Okay. So I can answer those questions in a multitude of ways. So for the
Okay.
first one, I would just tell him, going up to someone and saying, like, hey, I see this talent in you. Would you be interested in taking a class? I'd love to, give you my email and for us to set up you coming into a classroom for our TAT sessions at Children's Theater Company, or a one-on-one with me. Like, hey, I'd love to see your talent anymore. I'd love to work with you a little bit. So, hey, why don't you come to the theater and, obviously bring your parent, come to the
Mhm.
theater, bring your guardian or your caregiver or your parent, and let's sit, let's play, let's do some improv. Let's, sing a little song. Let's figure out where those talents lie. And then let's figure out the best classes in order to mold those talents. Because it really is a skill. As much as raw talent can get you far, skill and craft will get you even farther.
Yeah.
And that is where I guess a lot of people don't think about. It's like, yes, talent, put them on the stage, but the reality is you have to make sure that the student can last 9 shows a week. You have to make sure that they are taking care of their voices. You have to make sure that they're preparing in the way that they need to. So there's a lot of tools that you have to have that are preliminary conversations before we can get them on the stage. And then the second is, I'm looking for someone. I put out calls everywhere. I will go on Facebook and say, hey, we're looking for a 10-year-old actor to do this. But the reality is, and this is along with Jodie Feldman, because I watched her do it so much, she will see a young performer walking down the hallway, just singing and dancing. And she will go up to their guardian or their caregiver and say, I would like to see them. She's like, can I give you my email, and can you send me a picture of them, and then we'll have you come in and we'll work with you. But I feel like they have something, and I really, really want to see it. So I've learned from that.
That's got to make a parent's day, a guardian's day, to have someone notice the person that you're responsible for, because you thinking that my good stuff rubbed off on the kid, right? And so it's a testament to you that the child is reflecting and revealing skill and talent, and interest. Yeah, that's got to make them feel good.
And kids are inherently artists. That's the thing as well. Like, kids have this imagination that doesn't have to be brought out most times. It's just there, and if you do have to bring it out, it usually takes one question to crack that ice and to get them to explode into the full imaginative space that they would in private. So it really is a lot of comfortability, a lot of making sure that they know that they're talented and they're cared for. And then when you kind of open up that playing space, you kind of see them unfold. And, some performers, it takes a little bit more than others. But for most of them, it really does take someone like genuinely interested in saying, like, I see you. So and playing with them as well. And I think that one thing I talked about is, like, adults don't like to, we stop ourselves from playing because we think that it's childish, but really when it comes to theater, the whole world is play. The whole world is like, let's act like we're lions and figure out, what this production looks like. So when you're an adult playing and they feel like they have permission to play as well, then it just opens up this new world.
So as casting director, you're casting both adults and children, right? All ages for productions. What projects are you working on currently? And what are the casting challenges and opportunities that are on your desk at this moment as we speak?
I'm glad that you said that, because I'm actually looking down. So right now we are casting 2 productions that we are producing, which is Morris Micklewhite in the Tangerine Dress, which is a phenomenal show that will be opening on... Sorry, I want to look at it for you guys. October 10th, 2023. And then also How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which will be directed by Peter Brocious, which is our phenomenal holiday show. I would say the most difficult thing about casting them right now is that there are so many people to cast.
That are good.
That are good. There are so many people, but there are so many positions that need to be open. Like, there are about 15 people who need to be cast for the production. So that is probably one of the biggest things.
Michelle is asking, what's the difference between a talent manager and an agent? She says her son was cast in several shows and commercials, and his manager took 15%. How does that work?
Yeah, so that sounds about right. So a manager, an agent is someone who actively kind of like seeks jobs for you. A manager can do the same thing, but they kind of manage. You can have a manager and an agent at the same time. They kind of manage everything that you're doing, while an agent actively is seeking work for you. Unfortunately, most managers and agents take a percentage of the jobs that you do book. But what I will say is, if anybody ever asks you to pay them as an agent or a manager up front, rather than receiving a percentage of residuals, run away and run fast. Because that is absolutely not how it should work. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to take your money and not actively be seeking those roles. But the goal, if you're going to get an agent, is that they're getting you so many jobs at the time. They're actively seeking it and sending it to you, because that is their job. So that 15% is kind of like the payment for the actively seeking roles.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Raiyon Hunter. She's the new casting director at Children's Theater Company. I'm so happy to be with her today. children's theater, Raiyon, has been a regular on this program and also a regular feature in Insight News because we value the phenomenal work and the impact that you have on individuals and on community, on elevating art and the access to art for our people, for people in general. So kudos again to you and to all of the team over at Children's Theater Company. As we said earlier, it's a national treasure. It's a big organization, but it's a wonderful organization as well. What shows are going on right now over there? You're prepping for 2 shows, October and Christmas. Those will be the first ones. You've done the hands-on casting. But in the meantime, what's going on at Children's?
Unfortunately, we just closed. Well, fortunately, we just closed An American Tale, which is a phenomenal production that we just had. So we're kind of in between periods at the moment, and we just finished our season. So, if we talked last week, we would have been in the last week of the show. But, it's okay.
That's fine. You're from New Orleans, you told me.
Absolutely.
Talk about New Orleans. Welcome to Minnesota. 3 weeks
Thank
here.
you.
First impressions.
First impressions of Minnesota.
Yeah. Had you been here before?
Okay, so I have been here before, and I have been here in the winter. It was about 2 degrees outside, and it was the shock of my life. It was the weather shock of my life because I grew up in the South. So in New Orleans, if it gets below 35 degrees, most people are shutting down the city. No one's going to school. Pipes are frozen.
Yep.
It's terrible. So it was just interesting to feel, 1 degree. And I heard that it gets in the double negatives here. So I cannot say that I'm excited to see what that feels like.
You'll be witnessing that this year. I can guarantee you. Yeah.
Yes, but my first impression of Minneapolis, which is similar to New Orleans, is just the arts. One thing that I really realized about the city is that the arts are so respected here, which they should be because they are quite literally life-changing. But I love how people appreciate it and love it here, whether it be visual art, theater, dance, or music. That's something that I love about my city, the fact that art is everywhere. And sometimes doesn't even have to be defined. It just is. Like you watch something happening on the street and you could call it theater, but it really doesn't have to be defined as theater. It quite literally is just art. And it is the culmination of the city within itself. So one thing that I appreciated about Minneapolis was its love for the art.
Take me back to, you said you've been acting or on stage, around stage, or thinking stage craft since you were 3 years old. Do you remember a story from your first foray into being in front of the public or a public? If it's your sisters and brothers or mom and dad, or what's your early story that set you on the path? Yeah.
That set me on the path. So I remember my first ever acting camp was when I was 8 years old. It was at Anthony Bean Community Theater, which is a phenomenal acting camp run by Anthony Bean. And he's been running it for years, and there's so many young Black kids who have gone in and out of that camp who have been in the industry. And my dad loves to tell this story, and I'm kind of embarrassed telling it now, but I will. At some point within the entire time that I was performing when I was younger, I thought that I could sing. I thought that I had a really good voice. I thought that on top of acting, singing I was going to be in all the musical theater things. So my audition for the acting camp was with Alicia Keys' No One. And I sung it, and I sung my heart out. And my dad was sitting in the room as well. And my dad said after I finished, Anthony Bean turned to him and said, anyone who can get on my stage with that much confidence in how they sound needs to be in this camp regardless of how it came out. And that my dad didn't tell me that until like maybe 3 or 4 years later. But Anthony Bean is the reason that I am still doing theater to this day, and I got to exercise that muscle. But finding out that story really made me laugh because it really was the confidence in what I thought that I was doing that is the reason that I got into the camp. He said that the monologue was great. He said the song though. Yeah.
So do you still sing?
Absolutely, in my shower.
Okay, but you don't perform singing anymore.
You won't find me on anybody's stage.
Okay. So walk us through the the areas of performance or theater that you've been through. I mean, your notes said both directing, acting, and other stagecraft. Tell us all the things you've come through so far. You're so young, and
Yeah.
you got a lot of productivity in front of you, I think. But you've done
Yeah.
a lot already.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just really, I have to like give a lot of credit to the Alliance Theater. I mean, they were the reason that I was in a lot of spaces and that I got to be a part of a lot of production. So, yeah, I mean, so within the Alliance, within this Film and Leadership Fellowship, I was in different departments. So I was
Hmm.
in literary, I was in engagement, I was in artistic, and then I also worked in education. So obviously directing, one of my favorite shows that I ever got to work on was Do You Love the Dark, which is a show for theater for the very young, for 0 to 5, actually. And we got to work on that production and figure out, it's based off of a book that I think I have behind me. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can see that. That is written by my Spelman sister, Maya Lawrence.
Uh,
And, we got to take the book and we got to like make an entire show out of it for the babies, and how interactive it was and how beautiful it was and how it was still theater, which is amazing.
did it
Um,
work? Did it work?
it absolutely worked. I mean, the TBY always works. You just have to, it comes in different formats, and the
Mm-hmm.
Alliance does a lot of TBY work. And it stimulates them. It is fun experience that they get to
Mm-hmm.
like experience with, a bunch of other 0 to 5. And then the caregivers come and they sit on their lap. So it's a phenomenal experience for everyone.
Wow.
But yeah, so working on that was amazing. I love working as a line producer, as an assistant line producer. Those kind of were the fun things because I love organized chaos. So though it is sporadic when you get a call and you're like, oh, this thing has messed up, we need to figure it out, and then you have to sit there and come up with all the things. The sense of satisfaction that I get once the thing is done
Mm-hmm.
supersedes any other thing that could ever happen. Like, it's even better than the original like sporadic or chaotic moment of
Right.
being like, we don't know what to do. So I love producing because I actually love all of the mini surprises, and the mini problem solvings that need to happen. But yeah, so I love doing that. I also love working as a dramaturg. It's really, really fun to read a script and to kind of do the historical background and research on it. So what a dramaturg does is so if there's a script about something specific, like Confederates, which is
Mm-hmm.
by Dominique Morissette, which is phenomenal, but they talk about the Black codes in that show. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing that a dramaturg would do is go research the Black codes, pull out some emphasis for the actors, and you give it to them as a package or on a website or however the mode of delivery is, but it's information that they have within the show to know the history of it within the characters that they're playing. So if there's a character who's a civil rights soldier, I would do research on what it means to be a civil rights soldier and then send all of that information to them. So
Mm-hmm.
working at a dramaturg is actually very fun because it kind of helps me to stimulate my academic side as well.
Sure.
I was a comparative women's studies minor, which means that I was a super nerd. But I love researching. I love looking things up. But yeah, so that's pretty much.
Well,
I
so let me say that from a listener's, from an audience member's point of view, what I love when I go to see plays or poetry or music, I go with a desire to experience transformation.
Mhm.
And what I believe I examine or uh, uh, get from exceptional events is
Yeah,
something that is certainly the intent, but sometimes it's something that's more than was intended.
yeah.
And the
And there's
work
also
itself,
nothing like the shared experience of sitting in
that's,
an audience and where there's that dramatic moment where
yeah,
somebody is finding something out, and though everyone in the audience
gets it.
collectively is holding their breath.
Yep.
And then when they find it out, you hear everyone exhale, or you feel the
You
people
feel it.
around you exhale, and you have that communal moment with these people, this moment of fellowship, this moment of shared experience with people you don't even know.
Mm,
And it kind of brings you closer together. That's why during intermission it's so beautiful for us on the opposite end who are not on the stage to go into the lobby and see
mhm.
people discussing the show, because it means that it's working. If you're discussing the show, then it worked. It did what it needed to do.
Any best experiences you've had in that regard, watching a production go beyond, what you or the actors or the audiences imagined in the arena of transformation?
Yeah, I mean, and this is biased because it's a show that I worked on, but there was nothing like the audience response to Confederates by Dominique Morisseau, both versions. So it happened at Oregon Shakespeare Festival and it happened at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis. And I was able to be an observer in the room at Oregon Shakespeare
on
Festival.
both occasions? On both?
Observer in the room for Oregon Shakespeare Festival, directed by Nataki Garrett, and then I was the associate director at the version of at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis, directed by Elizabeth Carter, who I love. But there's nothing. I mean, it's a
So describe it. Describe the moment. Tell me what. Yeah.
Show about two Black women, and it's split worlds. One Black woman is a top professor in academia, and the other is a slave who is also a spy for during the Civil War. And it basically tells the tale of what Black women have to go through every day in both respects, and how it's actually very similar and it's not far from each other. Because I think the emphasis or the genesis of the story was people are like, it's 400 years ago. It's not the same for reality as it is. And one of the lines in the show is, as long as there's a house, none of us are free. I don't quote me. But the concept of freedom and the concept of what a master's house is, it's mind-blowing how similar the stories are and how beautifully that production was received. So that was one of my favorites because you felt everybody in the audience gasp and laugh and hold their breath, and you could hear a pin drop on some moments. So that was probably one of the best audience experiences. And it's the production, it's Dominique's words, because it translated to both productions that are in completely different areas. So I thought that was beautiful.
It's awesome. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Raiyon Hunter. She's the new casting director at Children's Theater Company here in Twin Cities, here in Minneapolis. And what a wonderful conversation this is. Raiyon, thank you so much for being here. I warned you before the show I was going to ask you who your people are, and you've mentioned about your mom and your dad. But yeah. I'm always curious. And so here's where my question comes from. I believe that lineage matters, and I believe that all of us, reflect generations and generations, hundreds and thousands of years of continuity. Absolutely. And so that the moment we're in is a result of something that emanated from creation, and it's the gateway to everything that ever will be. That's how precious this conversation and this breath is. That's my point of view. So I throw that at you to say, out of this moment that we're sharing, when you think about your family, your lineage, your people, your ancestors, how all of that poured into making Raiyon Hunter. Talk about your people for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's a day that goes by without me being so grateful for the people who poured into me, the people who are here and present on this earth and people who are not. I will say that I am a gumbo pot of Black women who have given me nothing but wisdom, love, encouragement, and spoken life into me. On top of like my mother and my aunt and my mommy and all of these different people in my family who have poured into me. There are people who are in my chosen families who have poured into me as well. I mean, my family has taken care of me and made sure that I'm able to pursue my dreams no matter what. And then there are people outside of my family, Allison Lou Brown, who I mentioned earlier as my mentor and big sister. There's also two women who are phenomenal, dynamic women in theater who have made the change and set the blueprint for me, who have poured into me personally and sent me so much love. Nataki Garrett and Hannah Sharif are absolutely phenomenal women that everybody needs to know. They need to know exactly what they're doing. They need to know where they need to know about them. Look them up.
Mm.
If you haven't, please do. But these are women who have given me so much and who have experienced so much that a lot of their conversation to me is, I don't want you to have to experience the same thing I did.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
want to give you this knowledge so that you know how to navigate this industry,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that you know how to keep yourself and your morals and your values and your joy intact as you navigate this industry. And that's something that I'm incredibly grateful for, because they don't have to do that. I think we
Sure,
have this
sure.
entitlement of like, people need to give back, but you really don't.
Mhm.
I do believe too much is given, much is required. And much
Mhm.
has been given to me and much is required of me to do. But at the end of the day, we have to realize how much energy it takes to be a Black woman who is leading an industry, who is at the top of their field. And then on top of that, also has to make time to give back to the next generation.
Mhm.
And we have to give grace.
Mhm. And so I ask you, how do you, um, both with joy and knowledge and awareness, navigate the challenges? Because we, African people, Black people, live in an environment that is hostile,
Mhm.
come out of a hostile experience, right? And like you said, in describing one of the plays, people think the message in Confederate was about then, but it's about
Mhm.
now as well. So,
Mhm.
how do you navigate with confidence in a way that your spirit and your drive are not diminished or destroyed or dampened, but really rather continue to grow and flourish with the work you put them to and through? How
Yeah,
does that work for you?
absolutely. I have two answers to that, and it's I'm a Christian woman, so
I
God.
love it. You got two answers to everything. That's
I do,
wonderful.
I do.
Go
I
ahead.
will always have multiple answers because there will be
Sure.
nothing that is
There
singular.
you go. There you
But the first one is God. I know for a fact that God never puts me in a place that He doesn't expect me to get out of, and He will never give me more than I can handle. So I always believe that, and I always have faith, and I think that's where a lot of the confidence comes from as well. Because no matter what situation I'm given or that's put in front of me, I know the fact that I wouldn't be there if God didn't know that I can do it, which
Right.
pushes me to
Right.
fight even harder to make sure that I do it. And then I think the second is community. It's always beautiful to text a mentor or a big sister and say, hey, I really need to talk. I'm confused. I don't know how to navigate the situation. Please help me. And the one thing that I like to do is if I have a situation, I like to bring it to multiple mentors and try to kind of get the sense of the heat of like,
Hmm.
which way
What
should
you
I
think?
be leaning?
What you think? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I kind of like take my gut and I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, I feel like this aligns with where I am in the moment.
Hmm.
But yeah, community. I mean, family is there for me all the time. My friends, if they see that I'm too caught up in work, they'll take me to go get ice cream, or they'll make me,
Sure.
go get a snowball. That's a New Orleans thing.
Right.
Um, to make sure that I'm still keeping that sense of joy intact. So I think community is important no matter who you are, to make sure that you have people around you for different reasons. I do have the people who will take me out of the house when I need to get out of the house.
Sure.
I do have the mentors to go to when I have, questions, or I have situations that I need to navigate. And then I do have big sister aunties when it's personal things that aren't, work things or
Hmm.
industry things that I need to
Hmm.
navigate as well. And big sister aunties that are biological by blood and that aren't biological by blood, people who are
Hmm.
chosen as well. So, I think community and God is really how I um, get through it. And it's, how I've been in this industry and so young and figuring things out. And it's just been really blessed.
Talk about lineage. How far back do you know in your family tree? Mom's side,
It
dad's side.
depends on the side. My mom's side, I know pretty far back. I actually got to experience my great great grandmother as she was alive. She only passed a couple of years ago, and I mean, it's funny you talk about lineage because every single one of my great grandmother, grandmother, and mother have poured so much into me. And the last thing my great great grandmother told me before she died was, if you give God all the glory, you don't have to worry about nothing.
Mm. Mm.
And I remember that quote because it was
Mm.
right before I went to New York to spend 6 months out there at the new school. And I really needed it because that was a tough time. And she actually passed like towards the end of my time there. But I carried that quote with me throughout the entire time, and it really got me through it.
How about other ancestors?
Yeah. And on my dad's side, we haven't gone all the way back, but I do know I recently actually got some information about my grandmother, my great grandmother on my father's side, Monica, who was this loving woman. I never got to meet her. And, my family was just telling me that, she loved to cook. She loved to learn. She loved to get people together and create community. And it was so funny that they said that because it's something that I kind of innately do. Like I love just getting people together and putting people in contact with people and creating community. So when they were talking about this, it kind of sat in my heart a different way, realizing that, this is something that has actually been passed down to somebody I haven't even met. I have traits of a woman who is my ancestor, who, is in my family, but I've never met her. I never got to speak with her. So it's beautiful because, every day when there's something different, every day when there's something different that comes up with me, I wonder which one of my ancestors did this come from. And I saw my mother actually put in the chat 5 generations. So my family before 2019 actually had 5 generations alive. And I was, actually, yeah, 5 generations alive. And I would think I was the youngest in the generations at that point. Yes. So yeah, and it was beautiful to have 5 generations alive. Imagine sitting at a table with your great great grandmother, your great grandmother, your grandmother, and your mother, and all of them giving you all of the knowledge, wisdom, and information that they've had throughout their entire lives. I mean, it was a blessing, truly.
So in the chat, that note from about 5 generations, that's your mom, Miss Titi?
Yes, that is my mother.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the comment. And please say more, Miss Titi. Be part of this
I
conversation
cannot say more. Thank you
as
very
well.
much.
No, this is so cool. And so, do you study your family beyond America? Do you have connections in the Caribbean? Are you aware of your African connections? How far?
I'm glad that you asked that because I wish I knew. I mean, I've always, and not to talk about the government and things, but I taking the test I've always been a little bit skeptical of because of where that information is going, and I don't want to come off like a conspiracy theorist because I'm not. But I've just never gotten around to actually taking the test and figuring out what that lineage looks like. And I think my family, on my dad's side, we have tried. Clementine Hunter, who's a phenomenal artist, folk artist as well, is actually my aunt, my great 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 aunt, which is something that we found out a couple of years ago, but we haven't really traced that family tree back, and it's something that I'm really interested in doing, because there is that sense of like you wonder what your heritage is. You wonder, what I love a good rhythm. We're from New Orleans, like the rhythm runs through my body, but I wonder where that comes from. I wonder where that innate kind of like sense of rhythm and love and sound and music comes from.
So I asked you before the show when I said the things we'll talk about. I'm going to ask you, what's your mission? You've said it already, but I'm going to ask you again in a very plain, straightforward way. Why is Raiyon Hunter on the planet? What's your mission? What's your work?
I mean, I have my passion and I have my purpose. My passion is theater. My passion is my love of people, but my purpose is to create space for BIPOC women within the theater industry. It is to create space. It is to create access. It is to create job opportunities. It is to let people know that we are here. And it is to uplift our stories. If I could uplift the story of any BIPOC coming of age little girl, then I will. And it's just something that I love to do because it's something that I sought when I was younger. It's something that I wanted so badly. I love to watch That's a Raven. I love to watch Penny Proud, even though it was animated. I love to watch True Jackson VP with Kiki Palmer. I loved those coming of age stories that made me feel like I could relate to them, that were less about trauma and that were more about finding myself and finding my identity. And I think that those are more stories that we need to this day.
And so, elevating our ability to talk about our authentic selves. To what end? What contribution will the approach, the understanding, the invitation, the desire to communicate at that level, what would it mean for individuals, for our people, and for humanity? Why is it important?
Can I ask more about that question?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't I guess I
Oh,
want to
oh,
ask like for
yeah.
more words.
What I'm asking is, you want to elevate the curiosity, the work of young BIPOC women in particular and others. And I'm just saying, to what end?
Yeah.
And because what's the vision of how the world will be as Raiyon Hunter has succeeded in lifting stories up, in elevating people's ability to connect with their own authenticity and to bring that to community and to continue building, creating legacy. Where do you see it going? What's the vision of your world? I'll put it this way. Uh, Rayon, describe 2050.
2050. 2050 for me looks, I mean, the goal of all of this is to create an environment where little brown girls, little BIPOC girls, little black girls feel as though their stories are being told, and they feel as though they can see themselves. But when they see themselves, they also see a whole person. It's not just an activist. It is not just someone who has to break out of the system, but I want that innate sense of wholeness. I want little BIPOC girls to feel whole. I want them to feel joyful. I want people to see them as whole and joyful and nuanced and having more than just these tropes and these stereotypes that we see. So my goal is like representation, and I feel like representation in the long run makes it to whereas you if you are told that you are important, that you are special, that you are whole, that you are a human being, and that you are loved, and your story matters. You see it when you track it to when someone's older, the sense of self-awareness and empathy and emotional intelligence that they have skyrockets. And I've seen it in the organization that I run, Express Yourself, which is an arts organization where we go into schools in the Atlanta area and we teach them emotional intelligence through the arts. And I see what it means to tell someone your story matters and that I want to hear your story. I'm actually interested in who you are as a person. You see their confidence rise. You see their social interaction rise, and that is only it's only the breeding ground. It's only the start, and it's only the foundation of what they could be if all of these characteristics were pushed into them earlier when they were younger. So that's my goal, in a couple of years for BIPOC women, but specifically Black women, to have rest, to be whole, to be healthy, to be loved, and for people to see us as a whole human being rather than these figures that can save the world.
So I love this. I love what you're saying and how you say it. And thank you so much for responding to my gargantuan questions. I like asking them, and I love to get the responses that I get. And yours is one that I love a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
in that same vein, um, yeah, for me, I ask the questions because as I began, I always looking to discover this whole notion of transformation. How do we become transformed individually and collectively? You've talked about that off and on with several examples of plays that you've done and been with. Uh, and how do we create then, Rayon, a community of people that is self aware of the power of its power, of our power to live both transformed and transforming lives. So we are attuned to the the act itself uh, of transformation as it unfolds in our lives. And how do arts? I think arts is one of the places that trains us to that, that
Mhm.
opens up, as you described it, a word, a sentence, something that will unlock all this wealth of genius in a person, in a child.
Absolutely.
Talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's not a question; it's just a comment.
yeah,
Comment back to me.
yeah. But I always have multiple responses to any answer.
Sure.
um, and I feel like that's something that we're discovering, that we're trying to figure out. What does it look like for us to create that community? Who does that community consist of? Yeah, I think that those are big questions that we're trying to literally discover and find the answers to. Something you asked earlier was, something about the invitation. and how does the invitation come? And I think Nataka Garrett has a brilliant interview where she talks about the invitation, and she talks about how you can't isolate someone for hundreds of years and say that you are not invited into this area, and then the one time you say, oh, we would like you to come now. Expect them to show up, and expect them to understand that the invite is genuine. It takes a while to earn trust. It takes a while to earn all of these different things. So the question of how do we create this community? I think we need to start asking ourselves, what does the community look? What do we want the community to look like? What do we specifically want to happen? And there might be different communities. There might be different subsections of the communities. But I think community is this overall general term that can talk about so many different things, that can talk about so many different kinds of people and what purposes and visions that they have within itself. But if we're talking about the greater community, like the greater Minneapolis community, I think that being open-minded and empathetic and always listening, and leading from a place of curiosity rather than a place of condemnation, always will help. Because then, I think a lot of the reason we don't have that community, or the reason that it's a little hard to have, is because we have people fighting about how to get to the end goal. What for people who we think are in the community with each other, like I talk about this a lot, like intergenerational women, we're coming from different areas and trying to find this, we're going after the same goal, but in different ways. And we're condemning the other way that the person does it, instead of coming together and saying, okay, we have these two ways of doing things. Let's figure out how to get there together. Why don't, when I pull, you push, or when I push, you pull? Let's figure it out.
It's rarely either or. It's usually both and.
It's both and.
Yeah.
And I've had to talk to several people who have had comments or who have had insight on, how BIPOC people decide to come at a challenge. And I'm like, how in the world can you judge how somebody is trying to navigate systematic racism? Please explain that to me. But then, outside of the community that we talk about, people are butting heads because people have a difference of opinion and we can't find a common ground. And no one wants to find a common ground. Now, if your common ground is rooted within my oppression, that's something different. But I think there is a level of humanity in finding that common ground, and it comes from a lot of conversation. So yeah, you have to be open to conversation, open to opinions, and not quick to condemn or assume. I think those are the only ways for that to happen and for us to engage in conversation.
Raiyon, thank you so much. I have to call it quits for now. I want to tell our listeners, I apologize for all the ambience. I'm on my deck in North Minneapolis, and they're building a park across the street. But I think that's part of the theater of the moment.
Yes.
What makes community. So enjoy. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My thanks to Raiyon Hunter. And thank you, listeners, viewers. We'll see you next time. Take care.